I am not going to tell you another story about some poor Russian farm boy who grew up in a small village who joined the army to help support his family. No, while that story may be true for many others, for me, I grew up in a modest upbringing. And once I was old enough to leave home, I joined the army. I didn't care much for the little pay a soldier received. No, what I wanted most was adventure and excitement, a life abroad. That excitement would come soon enough. Napoleon, with over 130,000 French and Allied troops, including nearly 600 cannons, would invade our homeland. We were at war. After being supplied, our unit marched to join Kutuzov's forces near a small village west of Moscow called Borodino. We were all excited and eager to finally fight the French. However, we had no idea what horrors awaited us. As we marched for days, getting closer to the French, the stories began swirling in my mind. Tales of how the French were monsters, savages who butchered children and ravaged women, plundering every town they came across. I had only heard whispers, never seen them myself, but that would change. The closer we got to the front, the more wounded men we saw, lines of them. Some staggering, some crawling, some carried by their comrades, their uniforms torn, faces pale, blood caked on their skin. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't want to look into their dying faces. Just keep moving, I told myself. Keep moving forward. Casualties were just a normal part of it all. Our officers kept driving us onward. We eagerly obeyed. Soon, we saw columns of black smoke rising into the sky. The distant crackle of musket fire along with cannon fire rolled like thunder. The cannons were the worst of it. Their booming grew louder with every step until they weren't just sounds, but vibrations punching into my chest. I had wanted battle, trained for this, but something new crept inside of me, fear, a deep cold and abiding dread. The sun beat down on our backs. The air was hot and thick with the drifting smoke. My throat burned from breathing it in. Soon I was covering my nose with my sleeve because the smoke made my eyes water and my lungs ache. As we marched closer, we could begin to grasp the full scale of how big the battle was. However, our commanding officers rushed us forward towards an outline of Russian soldiers ahead, firing desperately into the haze. The ground beneath my boots became soft. I looked down, realized I was stepping over bodies. Our own was disgusting and a horrendous sight. Some missing limbs, arms, legs, some staring blankly upward with eyes coated in ash, others too mangled to recognize. I forced myself not to look down again as I walked. We joined in line behind the men as they were still fighting. They didn't say a word as they were ordered to fall back. As I caught glimpses of their faces, I could see pure horror. They looked like men who had seen hell. We were now standing in the same position they were. Once in formation, our officers ordered us forward, deeper into the smoke. Cannonballs screamed overhead, smashing to the earth behind us, or tearing through lines of men in front of us. Musket fire snapped so close, it felt like it cut the air around my head. After advancing maybe 20 feet, we abruptly stopped. Through the shifting smoke, out about 60 yards ahead of us, I saw them. The French. Thousands of them. Their blue and white uniforms glowed faintly as the smoke thinned. Officers shouted in French, pointing towards us. I could see some of them fumbling to raise their muskets, caught off guard by how close we had gotten. My commanding officers shouted for us to aim. My heart hammered as I leveled my musket, pointing it at a blurry outline of a man in blue in front of me. The French were leveling theirs at the same time. The smoke lifted just long enough for me to see their faces, sweaty, pale, but determined. Fire! I squeezed the trigger. My musket bucked, filling the air with smoke. Countless other muskets fired besides me, leaving my ears ringing. I didn't know if I hit anything, but I heard the screams that followed. Dozens, maybe hundreds of French cried out and fell like rag dolls. It was a horrific sight, but just as quickly as the French fell, men behind them filled the gaps, and they kept coming. We immediately started to reload. My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped my cartridge. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My mouth tasted like ash. But in those moments, as we reloaded, I felt fear grip my soul. We had fired our volley. Now, it was the French's turn. I looked up just in time to see the French raise their muskets. Before I could even brace myself, they fired. Their volley tore into us. Now, Few sounds on earth compare to a volley of lead balls hitting men at close range. It wasn't just loud, it was sickening. I heard bones crack like dry sticks. I heard wet impacts as lead slammed into flesh. Men on both sides of me jerked and seemed to dance before flopping to the ground. The man directly beside me jerked and fell sideways into me, limp. Blood splattered across my mouth, warm and metallic. He then fell to the ground. There was nothing left of his face. Shock froze me. I was alive, somehow, alive. The French volley dropped hundreds of our men, but we still stood firm. The gaps in our ranks were immediately filled by new soldiers. Then I looked left and right. The carnage was breathtaking. What a lead ball could do to a human being. Few words can describe it. The cries and moans of my fellow countrymen were almost too much for me to bear. Yet, we stood there in formation. I wanted to cry, scream, run, anything. But my body moved on its own, shoving the ramrod down the barrel. It felt like we were racing against time and against the French. Who could fire and reload first? As soon as we leveled our muskets again, we fired. I saw more French drop, their screams and cries filling up the air. However, like before, the French once again leveled their muskets to fire. Now some of our men, being completely overcome with terror, finally broke. They dropped their muskets and tried to run. Our officers screamed at them to stop, but they didn't. Pistols cracked. Some of our own were shot in the back. Seeing this, it broke something inside of me. This wasn't bravery. This wasn't glory. This was hell on earth. The French fired. Their volley hit again. Body parts flew. My ears rang. My vision blurred. More of our men dropped like heavy sacks of potatoes. Yet I was still alive. I could hardly believe it. I was still standing. Then our officers, those that were still alive, shouted the words I feared the most. Fix, bayonets, and charge. My stomach twisted. I felt like I might collapse. My hands fumbled, attaching the bayonet to my musket. The French were already doing the same. A little drummer boy behind us began to beat his drum hard. Our officers, who I had grown to trust and admire, turned into animals, barking orders and marshaling us. We stepped forward, then another step, and another. I barely managed 9 yards before a cannonball smashed into a group beside me. There was no explosion, just instant destruction. Bodies were torn apart. Limbs went flying. I was lifted off of my feet and thrown to the earth like a rag. For a moment, the world faded to black. When I regained consciousness, all I heard was death. Now when I tell you few words can describe what I saw and heard, believe me, the French and the Russians were butchering each other. Locked in deadly combat, bayonets plunging into flesh, men choking on their own blood, the sound of steel against bone, men begging for their mothers, the sound of gurgling throats. I tried to stand, but I collapsed. A burning pain shot through my right leg. Shrapnel, a shred of iron lodged into my flesh, my own blood soaking my trousers. I dragged myself backwards, trying to escape the slaughter. I only had one thought running through my mind: survival. Get away from here as fast as possible. A fellow Russian saw me, and for some reason only fate knows, took pity on me and grabbed me under the arms. "Come on, comrade," he yelled. "We're getting you out of here." In the midst of the chaos together, we stumbled away from the nightmare behind us. After running for hundreds of yards through the confusion, we made it to one of the many field hospitals, if you can call it that. It was a nightmare of its own. A line of men stretched out, many missing limbs, some screaming, some silent with shock. Surgeons worked covered in blood, sawing off limbs, tossing amputated arms and legs into piles. We were laid beside a tent, one of dozens. The ground beneath me was already soaked with blood from previous wounded men. A surgeon of some sort looked at my leg, wiped sweat from his brow, and said to me, "He'll live next." That was it. No comfort, no words, no praise. I was just another broken piece of the army. As I lay there staring up at the smoke-filled sky, I heard the distant rumble of cannon still firing. I looked over to see hundreds of columns of new Russian soldiers eagerly marching towards the battlefield that I had just escaped from. I could barely speak, but my eyes told those fresh soldiers a tale of horror, a warning to them of the hell they were eagerly marching towards. However, like I did only 25 minutes earlier, they tried to ignore me and kept marching towards the front, towards Borodino, Napoleon's meat grinder.